Yo, Black Screen episode 9. What's good? What's good? My fellow Blacklights. My fellow Blackholites. Acolyte, but black. Oh, hold on, that's my Jamaican patty. Making my lunch. Making patties. That delicious bomboclat. There we go. Just the way I like it. We're back. We're back. Back and blacker than ever. Black Screen episode 9. Welcome to the one person here. Where the hell are my covers for the headphones? Jesus Christ. There we go. Completely unprofessional. I am so sorry. I am eating a Jamaican patty while eating this because I just do not care. I just don't care. It's my stream. It's my show. And I can do what I want. I wish I had for the occasion, the clip for Invincible. So every time I say the name, I could just switch tabs. Do that, unfortunately. Oh well. How we doing? To the one concurrent viewer, how are things? Unless it's me. It's probably me. It's definitely me. Yeah, it's me. Today is actually going to be a filler episode, I'm afraid, but I'm gonna make it fun. Because this is all about Invincible. I wish I had the title thing so that I can do the thing. So that every time I say Invincible, it just cuts to the thing. I can't do it. Because they really do put the BS in OBS, so I'm sorry, I can't do it. I apologize. But I can't do it. Anyway, so today we're gonna be talking about Invincible. Now, why are we talking about Invincible today? Well, it's actually quite simple, really. Invincible Versus is coming out. Invincible Season 4 is coming out. And everyone's excited. For all the right reasons, of course. Everyone's excited. I'm excited because I like Invincible. I think it's one of the last good things. It's not a perfect show. It certainly is not. But it has a lot of good things in it that it is worth watching for. So, excuse me. So, I think it is worth talking about a specific character that everybody seems to take a massive dump on, and some of it was for right reasons. This character, as the name implies, the title of this stream, this podcast episode, is Powerplex. It's John Breaking Bad himself. The man that broke bad. Man that broke bad before Walter White did. I think the only reason they cast Aaron Paul as Powerplex is so that you can get him to say he can't keep getting away with it or along those relation to Invincible. They thought it would be funny. That's the only reason I can think of as to why they would hire Aaron Paul of all people. I don't think it was necessary. Could have hired anyone. Oh, the actor that did the voice of Powerplex, well, Versus, that guy's pretty good. He could be the next Powerplex moving forward if Aaron Paul doesn't want to be in it anymore. I highly doubt they're going to kill him off. But if he is recast, then he would be a good replacement. Besides, I don't like how Aaron Paul sounds like he's always on the verge of tears every time he's like talking, or like he's congested. He sounds like he's either congested or on the verge of crying whenever he says anything, which is weird. I think they wanted him to sound like late Breaking Bad Jesse or El Camino Jesse Pinkman. I think it's pretty weird, but yeah. Other than that, I like Powerplex conceptually. I think he works in the comics a lot better. I have read the comics for Invincible, specifically the comics where, um, as far as the show has adapted, not the entire thing. I have definitely read those comics, and I do think that the comic does a lot of things better than the show. One of such things is how the relationship between Amber and what's his face, Mark, which I mean, some people don't like that she's a blonde bimbo, but she's actually a pretty reasonable character given her perspective. She's actually one of the most reasonable characters. Like, okay, my boyfriend's rich, but he's always absent, and his father was the moneymaker. And where is he getting all this money from? He must be traumatized over what happened to him. What's the next logical solution? Oh, he must be something along the lines of a drug dealer, or he must be a drug dealer. Which I mean, it's a bit of a leap, and from our perspective, yeah, like that's definitely not the case. And it seems like it's illogical, but we know that um he doesn't have the information we do. So, but she also has this cute moment with Mark too, where she discovers that he's invincible, and she just falls in love with him all over again. Like, oh my boy, she starts getting startled, like, oh my boyfriend's a superhero, then oh my boyfriend's a superhero, and then just falls in love with him all over again. Um, and it's a cute moment. It's a really cute moment. I think the moment where she starts to consider cheating on him because he's so absent, that would be like the moment in which he stops being likable. I think it's the one flaw. It's always interesting to see that whenever like usually whenever someone's a cheater, it turns out to be the be all end all for what makes a character likable or unlikable, depending on how it's handled. I think in the comic it's handled okay in the sense that like yeah, you understand why she would do something like that because I mean she didn't even go through with it. She just considered it because I mean the guy she was with was present and Mark is absent like 90% of the time even though he does his best. So, yeah, like I understand why she would even though she was still in the wrong regardless. Also, Mark kind of did well actually no it was Eve. Eve kind of forced herself onto him. So, but I don't really count that as him. But yeah, as for Powerplex, he's much better in the comics. Much better, better. In the show, I don't know if you guys have seen the show and decide to compare it to the comics, but the show is almost a second draft in a way to the comic as a way to repair some of the stuff that was done that could have been seen problems, and that's an admirable feat all on its own. But I think some of the best parts of the comic get lost because of that. A lot of it includes Amber, to be more specific. It involves Amber. Another thing is also the art style is very different from the comic, which also does get lost um in the adaptation. So yeah, fortunately that is just the nature. Um I think another big issue with Powerplex is also just the fact that at least in the both in the comic and in the show, uh, the wife who's like an enabler to his delusion because he is deluded. The wife kind of enables him, enables his delusions, and even in the comic, she's like more like assertive about the whole situation than in the show. Um, while Powerplex is also a little bit more unhinged because he starts attacking the Guardians of the Globe. Let me actually pull up the thing. Also, I really like the electric chair thing. I really do like the that's the move set. Final the one that he uses to try and kill Invincible. I think in the Invincible versus game they call it the electric chair. I like that. Bow, bow. But yeah, overall, it is a good. I think here in this adaptation, it's a good. I think it's much better here than it is in the actual show. And the it diluted and also just makes him look. It makes him look really dumb. Oh, so that's why. Okay. Also, fun fact, for those of you that haven't read it, the comic, his lightning is green. I don't really understand why it doesn't really mesh well with the black and red getup. It's like a completely different color. It would be like if Electro had like his yellow and green suit, his classic comic book suit, but he got blue lightning, which is something that the Ultimate Spider-Man TV show does for a brief moment while he still has the suit before he goes into his electricity. Like, I mean, it's more realistic, but like in terms of color, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I've always preferred Blue Electro. I think it he looks Blue Electro makes more sense from a physics standpoint, and you could probably argue the same for the comic. Which I mean, the hue looks good. It's just that coupled with the suit just looks weird. But the suit looks so I'm a little bit torn on it because I like the shade, but I don't like that it's paired up with the red, the black. But I like the red and the black on its own. It's a really cool looking. It looks a lot like Invincible's except without the goggles. So yeah, and I like that in the comic also. I think uh just facial expressions and like in the comic, they're more the characters were more emotive than in the show. But I think that's just because of the animation style. I don't think it's because there's anything like inherently like wrong with it. Like a different art style. It allows for less freedom, I would say, less exaggeration. It's a shame. Seems like cannot, but there is a significant con. Oh, there it is. There is a significant comic. I think the comic. I think I said it before, but the comic absolutely handles it. Handles Well, that's why. Wait, no. Like, where is it? Oh, don't. Oh, there we go. Found it. Yeah. Invincible. Yeah, there we go. How he looks in the. Oh, yeah. Here we go. This scene, the final scene. Think this is it for me. You think I'm no longer I'm here to say that to wrong, avenge all the deaths caused each going to make want to eat further keep it me. At this point, he's lost everything, gone off, really just gone off. I should probably get the one before Conquest, but yeah, there is this crucial piece of information that you should. So in the comic, he doesn't actually work for the GDA. He just works for the Pentagon. And the discs is something completely different. Scott, ready? Get ready. I'm not sure if you'll next. Sure if you're not. Scott, read. I just read the right act of those biotherms they've developed that are back. They've disappeared. Out. So he stole them from the military, basically. He works for the Pentagon. He works for the Pentagon. Then he already has access to all that technology, which is not GDA stuff. So here it makes more sense. It makes way more sense, and you still get that whole delusion arc. Delusion that Invincible was for everything that's happened to him. Still get the delusion, get the what, get all of it. Still there. It's just that it's there is still a present flaw that the wife. I mean, we don't know much about the wife or why she would enable him so badly. He must have a reason. Characters don't do stuff for no reason. Whereas in the show, you don't have that at all. It's gone. Not even there. But that's what we're gonna explore today. To be exploring that in this video. Defending Powerplex. Be fun. Be real fun. Fun. Someone defending Powerplex, something I have never seen. But window captures. Just saw it. Just saw it. Well, who's excited for versus? I want to play. I know that I'm gonna main Invincible, but the second that what's his face is announced, the second that Conquest is announced, I'm gonna be maining him. I'm gonna be maining Conquest. My worm stands ready for. Also, they kicked up Duplicate. Like, they're making up for how unlikable she is by giving her a ton of cake. That's insane. But hey, it worked. People like her now. Um, I can't even imagine what they're gonna do with Shrinking Ray. Like, I hope they stay with the uh sex bent Ray from the show. I like her better in the show than in the comic, and I think she's much more fleshed out in the show than in the comic. She's categorically a better character. Her voice actress, a lot to get used to. Very unique. Yeah, I like her a lot, and I want to see her in the game. They need to cake her up like they did, or should I say, duplicate. Anyway, let's begin.
Powerplex is an idiot. I don't think anyone's going to argue with me on that. This man has an undying hatred for due to a situation which he not only had no control over, but was actively trying to stop. Mark is as much of a victim as Scott was, but he refuses to face that fact, even in spite of being shown proof of it. And with the death of his entire family, Scott has only spiraled further into insanity. His character is clearly meant to convey the consequences of holding on to blind vengeance. Despite this, a majority of audience members view Scott's delusional hatred against Mark to be a sign of bad writing. This
Off topic. For someone who has such a low subscriber count, high viewership, this guy has really good editing. I like his editing style. It reminds me a lot of my own. This guy's a good editor, I can tell.
show is far from perfect, and there are a dozen tiny things that I can criticize it for, but almost none of them have anything to do with Powerplex. Aside from how much his abilities affect the already inconsistent power scaling, a few bits of clunky exposition related to him, and some plot contrivances. I know that sounds like a lot, but if you looked me dead in the eye and told me that these types of problems don't exist in almost every scene of the show, then you're just as delusional as Powerplex is. The main reason why
This is also true. The power scaling in Invincible is definitely an issue. Absolutely an issue. The way I interpret the strength of Viltrumite, basically, they're kind of like eggs that have different durability and different strength. So, if you're strong enough to crack another egg open with just one shot, aka Thrag, you're the strongest. That's how I would see it. Like, but over time, if you're like approximating equal strength or equal durability, or maybe you have low strength but high durability, then it would be harder to turn you into a donut, cut your head off. So that's how I see the Viltrumites as eggs. If that is confirmed, then I will gladly take that as an explanation. But until then, it remains as a problem. And if it sounds like I'm taking too many pauses, because the Jamaican patty's spicy. Okay, I'm not used to eating spicy foods all the time. That's my brother, not me. I would like to eat more spicy food, but used to it.
Why a lot of people, including myself, are able to tolerate these issues is because of the show's excellent character work, which includes Powerplex.
I would agree up until the point in which he said Powerplex.
So in this video, I'm going to be doing my best defense for Powerplex and explaining why from his point of view, the hatred he holds against Mark actually makes sense. Let's start with the obvious and analyze why Scott hates so much. Remember back in season 1 when Mark tried to save those two civilians from the collapsing building? Not only was the scene super morbid considering the outcome, but it served as a great character building moment for Mark, as even though he was living through what was probably the most stressful situation in his life, he still took the time to try and save civilians. Keyword being try. Well, in the third season, we later find out the identities of these two civilians, Jessica and Gretchen Duvall, along with a relative of theirs, Scott, who happened to be present and survived the Chicago incident due to his abilities. To start, I really like this from a narrative point of view, as aside from a few moments sprinkled throughout the second season, this is really the first time we've gotten a dedicated episode focused on the consequences of the Chicago incident. Scott also serves as a great point of view character, as his abilities allow him to actually contribute to the story, while also making us ponder the dozen other civilians who may be in the same situation as him but are powerless to do anything about it.
Also, fun fact, so this because of the nature of the show and how it treats the comic as like a first draft, the show actually has a lot more opportunities to flesh out Scott's relationship with Gretchen and his sister. So like his sister and his niece. So we actually got to like interact with them, see them, and yeah. In the comic, in the Chicago incident, which actually let me double check. Need to double check if she's actually seen. Double check because I don't believe we even get to see her in the. This is like way later. It's in perfect. Bow. Also, the betrayal happens relatively soon too, which is although that could just be an issue of the pacing. Like reading a comic is very different from like watching a TV show. Very different. So I don't know. Sometimes I prefer watching the adaptation over the show, over the comic, because like the pacing is better that way. Because when I'm reading, I am in control of the pacing, or at least like because of how fast I read and or how slow I may end up reading. So sometimes it'll be way too fast, sometimes it'll be a slog. And it's not the comic's fault. It's not the comic's fault. I just can't, it's harder for me to read but the thing is that adaptations nowadays so booty cheeks that I'm stuck with the comics. Not that the comics are bad, they're not. But yeah. So the comic here Yeah. This panel right here is where we actually get to see Invincible getting it rocked. Flies through a building. Um, but this is supposed to be the building that Gretchen and the other woman, I forgot her name, but uh, Scott's sister and his niece live. We don't actually get to see Invincible try to save them. We don't get that. So the comic definitely does falter in that sense. Where it doesn't falter is in the actual in-issue setup. From a world building standpoint, it does falter. But from an isolated perspective, it does it so much better. And the funny thing is, the train scene doesn't even happen in the comic. It doesn't happen at all. It's just doesn't happen. Like they crash through the subway, but they don't actually do the train thing. Like the fight is bloody and everything, and Omni-Man monologues like a villain. Like in the show, it's much. He starts out more understanding, but here he just monologues like a. Whereas the show, it comes across more like a soldier trying to convince his son to join his cause. Very different. Second draft.
Why he hasn't gone against Mark until now is also explained by showing us that Scott has been building up a legal case against him for the past year. Granted, the trial never ends up happening, but I don't think that was the point. More so, it helped ground his character from complete insanity by showcasing how Scott actually tried getting justice the legal way before going berserk. At this point, everyone could understand where Scott was coming from, and
Okay, so this is actually a world building problem because the lawyer in the actual show says that there's nothing she can do because there aren't any laws regarding superhero battles like that of Invincible and Omni-Man. But that's just not true because every superhero we see in the show answers to the GTA in one way or another, which involves legalities. It has to involve legalities to some degree. The second Invincible goes out to save people from the Flaxons, he's picked up by Teen Team, which is an extension of the GTA. The Guardians are not the only superhero team out there, and all of them are functionally they functionally serve as their military, which again involves legalities. The GTA is shown to provide aid for both victims of collateral and of the families of superheroes alike, should they be wounded or killed. If what Scott is doing is rooted in the court of public opinion, then a formal statement would have been able to be made by the GTA or the government itself. Given their size, influence, and resources, it wouldn't make sense for the public to not be informed that Omni-Man tried to kill his son and take over the planet. So already, the idea that there aren't any laws pertaining to superhero collateral, it just isn't true, even if the show pretends like it's not for this specific scene. It just doesn't make any sense. And I am almost entirely convinced, but I'm willing to double check. I am almost convinced that in the comic itself, it has the same problem. So, like in the comic, even though the comic shares that same problem, because in the comic he's just introduced. Like we don't actually get the build up, we don't get anything. He's just plopped onto the world, we get the motivation, and we're just left to interpret, we're just left to assume, oh, he probably tried the legal way, oh, he probably tried this. We can probably, it leaves everything up to inference and assumption, which, yeah, that's probably not the best way to go about it. No, it's definitely not the best way to go. But what it does do better, what the comic does do better, is say that he works for the government, specifically the Pentagon, instead of the GTA. Doesn't go that far. So, even though from the very beginning the adaptation, or the thing that it's adapting, the source material, that was the word I was looking for. Even from the very beginning, the source material was flawed. it had one quality that made it better than the show. That was it. And this is actually something that he mentions. Lotus Bird. That's the guy we're covering. Lotus Bird's video, Powerplex is not poorly written. I'll link it in the description. I haven't been doing that for recent streams, but I'll do it more often.
And if that's all we got on his motivations, this video probably wouldn't need to exist. But there was one slight detail that caused audience members to completely turn on him. That detail was having Scott work for the Global Defense Agency. And if you're still confused why that matters, the scene revealing this shows Scott going through footage of the subway incident, where you can clearly see Mark resisting his father's destruction. Assuming that Scott has been working there since way before the Chicago incident, it can be presumed that he's been privy of this knowledge since the beginning. But in spite of the facts being shown to him, Scott still tried building up a case against him. Fun fact about this scene, Scott isn't actually a part of the Global Defense Agency in the comics, with him only working in the upper levels of the Pentagon instead. This means that version of Scott never had access to any footage of the incident or knowledge of the incoming Viltrumite threat. But he does in the show, which begs the question, why would the writers make such a minor yet crucial change from the source material? Most people's answer to this would be poor writing, as it makes his motivations for hunting seem really stupid. But isn't that the point of his character? Have you ever considered that maybe we're not supposed to agree with Scott and his delusions against Mark are a negative thing?
No. See, here's the thing. Being dumb or delusional is not something that is done on a whim. You have when you're writing these kinds of characters, which is very difficult. I was actually talking to one of my friends about this, about writing a delusional character. He was asking me for advice, and I had to explain to him because it was a very difficult topic to tackle. Because our first instinct when we're trying to write a character is to make them logical, or to, make them intelligent, or have them behave as logically as a normal human being would, basic common sense. That's usually the default setting, but when you're trying to intentionally write a dumb character, it goes against intuition, and because it goes against intuition, your first instinct is to just make it logical, but you just can't, and it's very difficult. And for people that are trying to write those kinds of characters, I sympathize with you. Like, it's definitely very difficult because you have to literally violate intuition, but you have to violate it in a very specific way, a way that you would find in real life. So being dumb or delusional is not something that is done on a whim. You have to be extra careful over how delusional people interpret information. You have to be extra careful over how delusional people interpret information in order to seem convincing. You cannot arbitrarily decide that the delusional character in question can misinterpret information by reasserting their position. There has to be a way to follow the logic in their own mind. Flat earthers, for example, and I actually brought this up to this friend of mine. I hope he's watching. If you are, hi. Flat earthers, for example, have a logical through line that they follow, even if it is inherently illogical. You can see why they would think the way that they do, but it would require misinterpretation of information, but a very specific kind of misinterpretation. You have to walk a tightrope, if you will. For example, they believe the moon landing was fake and that the government had recorded fake footage of multiple people going to the moon in order to justify why satellite photos of the planet are fake. Which bolsters the point that the Earth is flat and we only have our senses to determine that, there is no curvature, that boats disappear over the horizon, yada yada yada. In their misinterpretations, what makes their cope so convincing in their minds is that all of it sounds probable in their minds. It all sounds very probable, but what makes it false is the fact that it's just not likely, which is the difference that needs to be delineated. You have to make it plausible, but not likely. That's where you have to walk that tightrope, and it's very difficult to do. I know that for me, the stories that I plan out, because I don't actually get to finish writing stuff because of how busy I am, But I know that for my stories, I would try to avoid writing those kinds of characters because of how hard it is. Um, so I know that for me, I'm not at a level where I can write a kind of character like that because it literally has to violate your intuition of logic, of reasoning, of common sense. Those kinds of characters are very difficult to draw out. No, very difficult to write outside of a comedic, um, you know, outside a comedic genre because characters like Richard Watterson or Homer Simpson, like they work just fine in a comedic setting. It's very difficult to write that kind of character in a very serious setting. It's very difficult because, especially if it's something that's life threatening, the first choice that would come to mind would be the logical choice. That's why so many people are upset with horror movie protagonists that make the dumbest choices imaginable because they have to literally violate intuition and common sense for the plot to work. So, and saying that Scott is supposed to be an idiot too doesn't make sense because he was smart enough to work for the GTA, smart enough to acquire information he needed, smart enough to avoid GTA capture, and smart enough to create a plan to lure Invincible out of hiding, and smart enough to understand how the energy storing discs are supposed to work. So it can't be that he's suddenly dumb about something like this when all of what he's doing is tied down to his emotionally rooted motivation. So you can't say that his emotions cloud his judgment either. Can't really say that. So yeah.
I usually don't like justifying strange character decisions with the excuse of it's supposed to be that way.
That I agree with fundamentally. The amount of times I have heard people say that that is the point is such like okay, so you're basically saying, "Oh, they're stupid on purpose. It's illogical on purpose." Oh, okay, cool, but that doesn't solve the problem that they're illogical. Oh, but it's on purpose. You can't have every character be smart. It's supposed to be dumb. Okay, the issue is that they're dumb in a way that they shouldn't be. So yes, I do agree with this sentiment.
Intentionally wrote him to be an idiot because it often leads to a slippery slope of arguments that can be used to defend actual egregious writing.
That is also true.
But this is one of those exceptions, as what most people seem to ignore is that Scott is so blinded by his hatred for Mark that he's willing to ignore whatever evidence is shown in order to justify his actions. It
You can't have the exception sound exactly the same as the kind of thing you say is not a good argument.
actually helps solves why Mark doesn't just explain his side of the story during their confrontation, as judging by Scott's reaction towards the subway footage, it's clear that it wouldn't change his mind on anything. You can think it's stupid, and that's totally fine. I agree with you, and I think the writers do as well, but don't think that just because he's an idiot, that makes it a flaw in the writing. A good question you might have is why Scott seems to have so much hatred in his heart for Sure, his sister and niece were killed in the Chicago incident, but that wouldn't cause someone to grow this irrational. And there's actually a reasonable explanation to this. Scott mentions that his parents died when he was young, which left him to be raised by his older sister.
My sister, Jessica, she raised me after our parents died. She brought an amazing daughter, Gretchen, into this world. They both died in Chicago, and it feels like their deaths don't matter.
While
I have heard that argument before, claiming that was like one of the many problems with the show. But no, that I mean, even if the exposition, like, yeah, it was very hand-fisted, that's already better than what the comic did. So you have the establishment there. Like, because even like on my first viewing of the episode, I'm thinking, wait a minute, how can you go this crazy over like your sister or your niece? I mean, they're family and you're gonna grieve them, but to push it to the brink of insanity, that's a bit much. That's a bit extreme, unless they were really, really close. But it turns out that they were in fact really, really close. So yeah, this uh that you already have the foundations for a good character. Um, which get undone the second you reveal that, oh, the world building is imploding in on itself to try and justify why he can't find justice. Like in the comics, it's not said. I don't remember. I mean, I can double check, but it is not explicit that he went to any courts. I think there is an offhand comment about them. Oh, we tried everything. There is like an offhand comment, I believe, but I can double check. No, never mind. No, I was sure that there was, but there wasn't, because I only read the comic once, um, or at least as far as the show has adapted it. I haven't adapted all of it. Yeah, no, there is literally no mention of the juridical system. So, for all we know, Scott is just a random civilian that doesn't have any knowledge, and because he's like on a lower level on the Pentagon, then yeah, no, he's in the blind. He doesn't know anything. So at least you can justify. At least you could possibly justify the character saying, "Oh, well, he has no idea." Okay, but shouldn't the government explain to people? Because again, these superheroes are government sponsored. It's kind of like Shield in a way. Like the GTA is basically Shield. So you don't think they would, make a statement on it? I can definitely believe that there would be skepticism, but they're almost acting as if there's like zero statement being made, public statement, um, that it was Omni Man and that was trying to take over the world, and Invincible was trying to stop it. And to my knowledge, like that is public knowledge. Everyone knows about it. Literally, everyone knows about it. So, is there a reason why in the comic Powerplex believes it? Believes the opposite? Well, not that is established. No, not really. So, in the show tries to remedy this by having it be so that he does try, but it comes at the expense of the world building. So you have that problem.
I can admit the exposition for this is very clunky. This small tidbit of information actually makes him also his guardian, and losing someone like that, especially in such a brutal incident, would definitely affect someone drastically. Unfortunately for Scott, his mental state was likely worsened by the only person he had to grieve with, which was his wife, who is as equally delusional in her hatred for Mark as he was. There's a likely chance that if not for his wife's encouragement, Scott would have let go of his quest for revenge and actually find the time to heal. Don't get me wrong, I'm not putting all the blame onto his wife or Scott. Actually, they're both equally at fault for this whole situation. The real victim of this whole quest for vengeance is their son. Both of his parents are clearly not great at dealing with grief, and instead of getting some therapy like normal people, the two of them decide to go against the supposed cause for their pain, which ends up with him and his mother getting killed. Scott refusing to take accountability for that and instead blaming it on Mark is stupid. The writer
Okay. So if it weren't for his wife, like he's not fully blaming her. And I mean, he is technically right, but even prior to all of that, you still have to account for the world building to implode on itself for this to be possible. And it would help too if we actually got to know who she was. And this is something I mentioned earlier. You can actually shave off a lot of scenes, particularly the ones with Amber and William. You can shave those scenes off to make room for us to get to know Scott's wife, so we can understand why she would end up being as delusional as Scott. I mean, what if she was a schizophrenic, or what if she's one of those uh people that believe that they're turning the frogs gay? Why don't you have her be some sort of conspiracy theorist. I mean, she certainly looks the part, but with with her bags in her eyes. So like, yeah, you can do something with that and shave off unnecessary filler, and you can resolve the issue of Mark and Eve and Amber and Kyle. You can have that all be resolved at a later date. You don't need to have it here in this episode. You're not obligated to have it here. So this could be Powerplex's episode instead. I mean, it technically is, but for the majority of it, we also have scenes of Paul and Debbie, and again, those scenes could be shaved a little bit or placed earlier or later in the season. Doesn't matter which one. In fact, Paul is a very minor character in the comics too. He barely does anything, and he looks different too. He's bald and he has a beard. But yeah.
Writers are well aware of that. Actually, with how Scott has been shown to act throughout the episode, it would have been out of character for him if he didn't blame. Powerplex is not a product of bad writing. He's actually pretty well written, all things considered. It's very easy to write a character like Scott and have him make all sorts of decisions with no rhyme or motive because he's an idiot, disregarding that even delusional people have reasons as to why they make their choices, no matter how nonsensical they are. Thankfully, the writers of this show gave us just enough to believe that he genuinely thinks he's in the right. Again, we're not supposed to sympathize with Scott, more so empathize, which means understanding where the person is coming from even though you might disagree with it. I originally planned to talk about Angstrom Levy in this video alongside Powerplex, since those two kind of have the same issue where people write off their irrational behavior as bad writing. But it was a quarter way through writing that section where I realized I had way more stuff to say about Angstrom than initially planned. So that made me decide to just wait until his story ends before continuing on it, which won't be for another 3 to 4 years if the show keeps its yearly schedule.
Okay, so I fundamentally agree with the premise of what he's trying to say, but I don't think this applies to Powerplex at all. I think it's easier to defend someone like Angstrom Levy because, and again, I have seen criticism against him, but something that people don't seem to remember is that all of the personalities, like hundreds of thousands of Angstroms who have seen Invincible kill their loved ones over and again, all of them warring inside one mind, are overriding the identity of the main Angstrom, which is like the one good one. And so he's just become this amalgam of Angstroms. So like, we don't even know where the original Angstrom ends and where all the others begin. So that amount of strain on a single mind, even if it's expanded, it's still like malformed and grotesque. And yeah, like I think Angstrom is significantly more justifiable than Powerplex. But with Powerplex, he can't be the exception he claims because his origin relies on the world building imploding and for him to ignore evidence in a very specific way that delusional people wouldn't. He watches the train footage on loop as if to see if he's missing something, and he looks frustrated too when he looks at it, almost as if he can't find a reason to find fault in Mark because simply put there isn't any. It's almost like he wants to hate him and so he blames him for the death of his. And this can only happen if there was a hatred that had existed prior to their deaths. So it's kind of like he hates Invincible before their deaths. They die, Invincible was involved, therefore Invincible's responsible even if he didn't actually do anything. So that would be a lot more justifiable if he had a prior hatred before Gretchen and her mom died. That would be fine. But that's just not what happens in the show. For all we know, he didn't even care about Invincible up until he got involved with his family. Indirectly. That's not what the show presents, so it just doesn't work either.
Still making videos by 2030, then expect something along those lines around that time. By the way, thanks for all the support on the Cecil video. I never expected it to gain as much traction as it has since I mostly posted that critique for fun, but I'm grateful nonetheless. My next video will probably be something unrelated to this show.
Okay, that's basically the entire video. That's basically the whole thing. Overall, though, I am actually happy that this person, what's his face, Lotus Bird. I like this guy. I think he's a lot more reasonable than other people. Like, he has an understanding of how writing is supposed to work. I think he's wrong about Powerplex overall, but he generally has a good grasp on writing. So I would definitely want to have a conversation with him on the topic, but I would still, I think he's still wrong about the Powerplex thing. But, this actually was refreshing because at least you're like, I'm talking to someone that's like using the same standards that I use. And so this has actually been really refreshing. It's a really easy stream. It's been a really chill stream, actually. I didn't get mad or I didn't get upset. Again, I mean, this is a filler stream, so it is supposed to be like that, I guess. I mean, that is the ideal. But yeah, no, like it's refreshing, actually. I mean, compared to everything else that I've covered in the last, what, 3-4 years maybe. This is actually one of the most refreshing videos that I've ever had to cover on Blackscreen. So congrats. Yeah, I like this channel. So you know what? For the fact that just for the fact that he's a reasonable human being and not someone like Up from the Depths or Max Allo or High Top Films or anything like that. Just because of that, I'm gonna sub just to show support because this is genuinely a really welcome change. I mean, the stream wouldn't be interesting if I didn't get mad, but I think this was a topic worth discussing because on top of the fact that Invincible season 4 is coming out, um and Invincible season 3 is my favorite season so far. I also think that I haven't talked enough about Invincible in this channel, so I want to do that. I want to change that because I really do like Invincible. It's one of my favorite shows right now. It's one of the last things I'm looking forward to. So one of the only things I'm looking forward to, actually, besides the next issues of Berserk or well, really, or Dune, actually. Dune, the third trailer for Dune is coming out, so that's exciting. I need to finish. But yeah, no, like it's definitely a refreshing thing to cover. We're talking to someone who's actually intelligent, someone who knows what they're talking about. So yeah, I thank you so much for you know the watch.